And I had grown up watching these very hokey popcorn movies about disasters.
Disaster movies are as old as filmmaking itself.
Movies like Earthquake, Airport, Airport 1975.
With a cast of the screen's greatest names, Charlton Heston, Karen Black,
I'm scared,
and award-winning singer Helen Reddy as Sister Ruth.
Would you be more forgiving of your human imperfections?
Studios lavish millions on them, using state-of-the-art effects and sound design to immerse you in the horrors of catastrophes of every imaginable kind.
Can I still take off?
But despite their pretense of seriousness,
We hope so.
That is my family up there, so I don't want to hear "we hope so."
these films are actually designed to be perversely enjoyable. They're spectacle,
What's he think he's doing?
wrapped around cheap melodrama. And yet they enjoy huge success. We just seem to enjoy watching terrible things happen to people, when they're not actually happening to anyone. Whereas if we actually experienced something like this firsthand,
He lost control of the car, and we went across the oncoming lane of traffic and started heading toward a bank of trees.
our trauma would be devastating.
And I thought, oh, so this is it. This is how I'm going to die.
In late 1993, I saw a new film directed by Peter Weir.
The car was totaled, but I was completely unhurt.
Although its plot is set into motion by a disaster,
For the next 24 hours, I was exhilarated.
its intentions could not be more different than cliché disaster movies.
I had no fear. Everything was beautiful. Everything tasted fantastic. And the more I read about it, the more I was interested in it. And I finally decided I wanted to write a novel. And I thought, well, let's do this subject seriously.
It follows two people who miraculously survive a devastating plane crash. Carla loses her son and is overwhelmed with grief and guilt. Max loses his best friend. But strangely, he also loses all fear and walks away with an indescribably vivid sense of being alive. He's so transformed by this feeling that he'll do anything to hang on to it. And it soon becomes obvious that his desire to keep feeling alive is gonna get him killed. When I finished watching the film, I couldn't get out of my seat. I didn't want to talk to anyone or even move. I didn't want to break the spell. I just wanted to hang on to this feeling so vivid that I didn't even have words for it. 30 years later, I started wondering how the film worked its magic and how such a sensitive and human movie ever came to be made within the profit-driven world of Hollywood.
Hello.
I decided that I needed to talk to an insider.
Hello.
So I reached out to the architect of the story.
I'm so excited to talk to you about Fearless.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Rafael wrote the original novel and adapted it for the screen himself. I was fortunate to speak to him for several hours as he talked about the process of bringing this story to life as a novel, as a screenplay, and finally as the finished film. I've published our entire conversation as a podcast episode, which you can listen to here. Rafael goes into far greater detail than I had time to include in this video essay, not only about the making of Fearless from both creative and business perspectives, but also many behind-the-scenes stories about working on this and other projects, a discussion of how the film business has changed, and where we might be headed. So let's take a look at the choices and techniques that I think made the biggest contribution to the film's impact. Let's find out what makes Fearless a cinematic masterpiece. After I made my first grad school film, I had to screen it for the faculty. The feedback was devastating, but instructive. Its essence was that my little movie wasn't a story, it was a situation. Now, this is a critical distinction for storytellers. But what's the difference? Situations are static. But stories confront the characters with problems that pressure them to change.
Come on. It's me. It's me, Will. Remember we went to kindergarten together. Whoa.
Or in tragedy, to refuse to change and suffer the consequences.
Mayhem, theft, resisting.
Those problems have to be too big for the characters to ignore.
You hit a cop, you're going in.
Thank you.
But they also can't be too easily resolved.
Where are you?
Otherwise, there's simply no drama.
There's no chance that you're pre-law, is there?
No change, no forward motion.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
And no story.
Nice talking to you.
Even more importantly,
What the fuck do you want?
the only way the characters should ever be able to get what they want is to change as people.
I've spoken to the judge, and he's agreed to release you under my supervision.
An internal change.
But under two conditions.
What are those?
Specifically, the plot has to force them to confront the one thing they would do anything to avoid.
Finite math.
This is perhaps the hard truth of life
Sounds like a real hoot.
and the engine of great stories.
And the second condition is that you see a therapist.
We want things to be different,
It's better than spending that time in jail, isn't it?
but we don't want to change in order to get them. And so we often just get stuck. In most stories, the protagonist has to confront their greatest flaw.
Were you scared?
But this story begins with an experience
This is it.
that frees Max
This is the moment of your death.
from all of the fears and falseness that have always plagued him.
I'm not afraid.
For the first time in his life,
I have no fear.
he feels truly awake and alive.
No, not at all.
He just wants to hang on to that feeling.
Naturally, it's in my interest to get as large a settlement as possible. In fact, that's my job. I don't apologize for it.
I can't lie.
He refuses to give it up. Even though it makes it impossible for him to function in normal life, where we suffer
Just keep your belt on and hold him. You'll be okay.
and feel fear and tell half-truths every day.
You'll be okay.
Now, Rafael had gotten this far in the development of his story idea, but he didn't feel like it was enough.
I kept thinking, God, it's really bullshit to write about a horrible plane crash and have the only experience of it be someone who thinks it's great.
You know what time it is?
Carla's pain is so great
Fucking tune.
that her goal is the exact opposite of Max's.
Please, just let me die.
In part of my research, I discovered that often what happens in these crashes is that small children or babies are killed. And I thought that there was nothing worse that could happen to someone than have their child killed, especially while in their care. And that's when I thought of Carla.
While surviving the crash and losing her son was obviously traumatic, the true root of her suffering is a terrible secret which the film spends most of its time excavating.
When I was 13, my father died in front of my eyes. It looked like somebody with a big hand just reached down and squeezed the life out.
That was God.
Both Max and Carla are traumatized to such a degree that their situations are unsustainable.
He and your wife are the only survivors I can't reach. She won't talk and he won't admit the crash was bad.
They demand change, and change is the engine of plot.
Gotta talk to somebody.
But their extreme behavior tells us that their trauma is much too severe to be overcome easily. That's bad for them, but again, that's exactly what a good plot needs.
Hi. I'm Bill Perlman. Hi. Going home, right?
You're a shrink.
That's right. I specialize in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder.
The plot uses the supporting characters to actively pressure them to work through it and move on.
We used to live in tribes. And when a tribe suffered a disaster, a exploding mountain,
One of the most remarkable aspects of the film
a great flood,
is also its starkest difference from a typical disaster film.
and retell the event.
While these films lavish most of their time and money on spectacle, paying lip service to creating believable characters we're supposed to care about,
You're sure?
Do you mean am I sure I'm pregnant? Or am I sure you're the father?
Fearless spends most of its time on scenes where people are simply talking.
Would someone tell us their story?
Peter said to me that very first meeting, "Oh, this lovely scene, this beautiful scene you've written, you know we can't do that. We can't have this long scene, you know."
One of the best scenes in the entire film utterly contradicts conventional screenwriting wisdom.
I said, "Yeah, I know. I said, "Do you want me to start cutting it?" He said, No, don't cut it now."
Jesus, this is going to take forever. I can't stay. I have to go back to the office.
What's your name?
I'm John Wilkinson.
It's very long and consists only of people talking.
You must be very committed to your work.
When we got to the pre-production, I said, "Don't you want me to cut it?" He said, "No, Rafe, I think what we'll do is we'll shoot it, and I'll cut it in the editing room."
Christ, this is sadistic, and we're not accomplishing anything.
They're also talking about their trauma from the crash.
Hello.
So it's emotionally messy and often uncomfortable.
And then when I went and saw his first cut, the whole scene was there. And I said to Peter, what happened? He said, I couldn't cut it.
Do you remember me?
At one point,
I'm Lisa, the flight attendant.
the person most connected to Carla's anguish
Yes.
tries to help them both move on.
I think about you and your baby a lot. Do you remember how I tried to help you with the seatbelt?
But this conventional approach
Help me?
can't reach Carla or Max.
You told me that everything was going to be okay. You think you helped me? You told me to hold him. I couldn't. You told me everything was going to be okay. It wasn't.
Please, don't say that. I didn't...
The therapist, not knowing what else to do, asks Max to try to talk to Carla.
Car's across the street. Let's go for a drive.
No, I can't. The doctor told me I can't go nowhere.
You'll be safe.
Now, Max isn't a psychotherapist.
You read the papers? Everybody with me lived.
He's not even in his right mind.
We're safe because we died already.
But he is absolutely honest and unguarded with Carla.
Stop the car. Please, just stop the car. I'm not dead. Let me out.
No, you're not. That's not what I meant.
But what ultimately reaches her is his compassion and lack of judgment.
My son died. I wasn't thinking about dying. I was thinking about...
Now, there are any number of melodramatic ways this scene could have ended. But instead, it focuses on the look of compassion on Max's face and Carla's distress in a visual way.
Talk to me.
So we have two people in serious trouble who have to change.
Tell me what's going on.
But we know that this kind of change will be the work of months or even years.
Talk to me, Max.
But the film doesn't have 60 episodes over 5 TV seasons to try to make psychotherapy interesting to watch. It has 2 hours. Rafael solved this problem very elegantly.
I walked away from that crash with my life. That's what survived. The taste and touch and beauty of life.
But I love that.
I won't give that up.
I don't want you to give it up. Let me be part of it.
He left the long, messy process of healing
You can't.
outside the scope of the story, because we don't need to watch the entire process of change from start to finish. We just need to see a breakthrough that leaves us with the sense that these characters are eventually going to be okay. But a writer can't risk merely engaging the sympathy of the audience the way we read newspaper accounts of tragedies far away, feel a flicker of pity and thanks that it's not us, and move on. A story has to make us care deeply about the fate of people. So Rafael puts the focus firmly on the unique relationship between Max and Carla.
Warner Brothers said, we'll buy it if you guarantee us that the ending is different, that instead of him staying with his wife, he goes off with Carla.
But in a sense, this is a red herring, because this story is not about two people having a wonderful friendship
You've been dreaming a lot?
or an illicit romance.
You bet.
Me too.
If you look closely, you can find clues about this.
I wanted to make her a very different class, a very different kind of person. I wanted to make her a real Catholic who really believed in, who would struggle with why God would do this to her.
You know he hurt me.
Max and Carla are from very different worlds and different social classes.
You hurt me forever.
If the crash hadn't bypassed the boundaries that usually divide people, it's hard to imagine them ever becoming friends,
But I still believe in him.
much less at such a profound level.
Well, people don't so much believe in God as if they choose not to believe in nothing.
That makes their deep connection all the more poignant because it's that much more unsustainable.
Life and death, they happen for no reason.
We sense that it's unlikely to outlive the extraordinary circumstances that brought them together, even if such an intense friendship could exist with them both being married.
I mean, Warner Brothers' reaction was more along the lines of this is a romance and the audience is going to care about who he goes off with.
Hi, I'm Carla.
I know who you are.
Rather than what it was really about, which is how do we deal with our mortality?
Secondly, the relationship isn't used as an escape from their problems or as an end unto itself.
I'm sorry to bother you like this, but I thought that it would be good if we talked.
But as a pressure cooker.
Well, I can imagine what you must be feeling about what has happened.
Oh, really?
The closer their relationship becomes,
You can.
the more complications it creates for them.
Why should I be angry with you? Wasn't it Max's idea?
Well, I know that it was a crazy thing that he did, but...
very much in love with
No,
you.
it's not
to
like
risk
that.
his life for you.
No.
Isn't that love?
No.
Max lets his guard down, believing Carla is the one person with whom he can be utterly fearless and honest. That's going to leave him unprepared for what's going to happen later. And the more Carla trusts him and lets her guard down, the harder it is for her to keep her secret hidden from him and from herself. The film provides one other clue about the future of their relationship that has to be credited to Peter Weir's direction. Although the story is set in San Francisco, one of the most famously beautiful cities in the world, he specifically told cinematographer Alan Davio that he wanted to avoid any shots of the city or its most famous sites.
Where to?
Beautiful downtown Oakland.
Oakland.
Even when Max and Carla specifically go on a drive to look at the sites, they actually leave San Francisco and drive across the bay to Oakland, which is not exactly what tourists come to see. Avoiding familiar images of San Francisco transforms it into a place that exists only within the world of the story, and specifically only within Max and Carla's relationship. Like Max himself, their relationship stands apart from everything familiar, hinting that this relationship does not and cannot exist in the everyday world. Two people bound together by trauma and a rarely seen sort of love. But ultimately, it's unlikely to survive in the world we know. Withholding familiar images was a brilliant way to underscore this. The trust and intimacy of Max and Carla's relationship reaches its peak in a 13-minute sequence that begins as they go into the most banal place in America, an urban shopping mall at the height of the Christmas season.
I can't believe you did that.
Inside, they're surrounded by the most ordinary sights. People shopping, kids being kids.
So happy.
But these things have a different effect on Carla than they would on most of us. And inevitably, these reminders of what she's lost brings back the grief she hasn't been able to process.
I was gonna buy him a lot of presents.
In a sense, the scene that follows foreshadows how Max is always able to help her cope with her grief.
Well, let's do it. Let's buy them. Let's buy presents for the dead. Come on!
In unconventional ways
What are we gonna give him?
that a therapist would doubtless never propose. There's a poignant sense of emptiness here.
Where are we going?
Of running out of places to hide.
We could disappear. You all right?
There's something that I gotta tell you.
And finally, Carla's terrible secret all comes spilling out, and the dominoes of the plot begin to fall.
I let go, Bubble. I opened my arms.
Not only does this confession send her into a panic attack,
Carla, it's not your fault. Carla,
so intense that it seems like she may never recover,
Carla, you're not to blame. We were going hundreds of miles an hour.
it also brings Max face to face with the enemy he's been running from throughout the story,
Come on, stop it now. That's enough. No.
which is his own fear and trauma that he's been keeping buried.
What have I done?
The crash was the beginning, and it would haunt them throughout the story, but I didn't know what my resolution was until
This is your baby. Now, this is your chance.
I thought, ironically, back to my original inspiration. The car crash. That he would crash the car deliberately
Pray to God to give you the strength to save your baby.
to show her she couldn't have done anything to save the child.
The car crash is the turning point and the pinnacle of Carla's character arc. It releases her from her self-imposed guilt
When he died, I had nothing.
and allows her to start to inhabit her life again.
I couldn't feel anything.
But here the script turns this into a brilliant twist.
Now I can feel something.
Max risks his own life to help Carla,
I can feel something inside besides the painful Bubble. That's because of Max.
it's the breaking point for his wife.
Maybe this wonderful friendship that you have might have helped you. But it hasn't helped Max. Max is not an angel. He's a man. He cannot survive up there.
Carla desperately wants to find a way to help Max the way he helped her.
I really wanted to just tell you how much.
But in the end, there's only one thing she has the power to do.
things can't go back to the way that they were. You know what I mean?
When he loses his only friend and confidant,
I want you to go home, Max.
I can't get back.
Max finally crashes down to earth.
Say goodbye, Max.
And as I watched the story reach this strangely quiet point, so close to the end, without any resolution in sight, I wondered how it could end. With Carla gone from the story, there didn't seem to be anything that could bring Max back to earth. There's no time left in the movie for long conversations or gentle persuasion. In a sense, Max needs something as dramatic and sudden as the crash itself to jolt him back to life.
I want you to save me.
Instead,
These are for you.
the story brings the obnoxious lawyer into the scene.
Great.
For perfectly logical reasons.
Because of your suicide attempt. That's how I presented it to them, that you were suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome and that they were going to be on the hook.
He's also a fresh reminder precisely of the ugly world which Max will do anything to avoid returning to.
I mean, what am I going to do?
But the real reason the plot has brought him here is this.
Anyway.
Max eating strawberries has been carefully set up in 2 previous scenes. This was the first time we saw him defying death to kill him, risking his life again and again to feel alive.
A ripe strawberry.
Much later, we see it for a second time. The screenplay uses a classic structural device here that you'll find in every medium, which is the rule of 3s. You introduce an action in a memorable way. Next, you repeat it.
Let's dance.
And because the human brain is wired to recognize patterns, all it takes is this single repetition for us to feel confident that the next time we see this, we know how it'll end.
No, Max!
But that expectation is nothing but a setup. Because the third time the action appears, something different happens.
This is it. This is the moment of my death.
It was what occurred to me in the car.
Bringing Max back to a moment of his death gives the film a poetically logical reason to return to the plane.
Close your eyes. It'll be over soon.
Seamlessly connected by the continuous music that builds throughout this scene. And here, at the end of the film, we finally see the full horror of the crash. Back at the moment between life and death that changed Max in the first place, the film dangles the horrific prospect of Max surviving a plane crash, only to die from a strawberry. Confronted again with the reality of dying, he has to make a decision. Is he willing to return to life, even though being alive means living with fear? It's no small thing to live without artifice, to be available to everything life throws at you, and not to let fear cripple you. It's no wonder that Max wanted to keep fear out of his life. He has to find a way to live with fear, but never lose the sense of being vividly alive.
I realized during that 24-hour period that I was functioning a great deal out of a kind of ordinary fear of taking chances and of really pushing myself to be as original and as bold a writer as I could be.
And at the brink of death, he finds the courage to live again.